Hey guys, today we're in the book of Numbers, chapter 13. So chapter 13 begins our third section. We spent time at Mount Sinai. We spent the last three chapters traveling. And now from chapters 13 to 19, it deals with them in the wilderness of Paran. So in chapter 13, we start out, the Lord spoke to Moses and send men into the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to people from each tribe, their father, you shall send a man. And so here God tells Moses that he needs to send what we know as the 12 spies, one man from each tribe. Now we find out later in the book of Deuteronomy in the first chapter that it was each tribe chose the man that they would send in. Of course, they're going to send in the most athletic, the most loyal, the most honest person because they want to hear the full report, an honest report of what was in the promised land. And so God said, you need to do this. Israel picked out one man from each tribe, and they go in. And then you see in the next several verses, it tells us the men who went in. The two that are most important is Caleb. We see Caleb from the tribe of Judah, and then we see Hoshua, the son of Nun. So these are the two who had faith in God. And then we see in verse 16, it says, and Moses called Hoshua, the son of Nun, Joshua. Hoshua, we talked about this. If you're in Green Acres, we walked through the book of Hoshua, Joshua. Hoshua simply means salvation. And Moses renamed him Joshua or Yeshua, which means Yahweh is salvation. So his name meant salvation, but Moses changes it to God is salvation or Yahweh is salvation. And so Moses sent them up and tells them to go into the Negeb and into the hill country to see what the land is. And so the Negeb is the very southern tip of Israel. It's desert. And they're going to go there all the way up into the hill country, which is the northern part. This is the plain. This is kind of the rolling hills of the nice grass, completely opposite of where they have been for a while. Even in Egypt, doesn't have rolling hills of grass, but even in Mount Sinai, in a desert kind of terrain, this would have been different and unusual and would have been great to see. And so he sends them in and he says, I want you to see if they are strong or weak, few or many, good or bad, if they have camps or strongholds, camps or cities, if they're rich or poor, if there's trees in it or not. And then notice what he says. Moses tells them, be of good courage. This is a lasting line for those of us who walk through the book of Joshua. It was Moses who told Joshua first to be of good courage, right? Do not be afraid. And then God has to always keep reminding Joshua in the book of Joshua to be of good courage. And we see that it was now the season of the first ripe grapes. This is around the time of July. So we have from the traveling of leaving Sinai to now here at Kadesh, at the wilderness of Paran, 2 months have transpired in traveling, right? So we are in the hot part of the year. We are in July. And so as they went up, it says they went to Rehob, which is a very northern part of Israel. They went up into the Negeb, which is the south part, and they came to Hebron. Now, there's lots of cities in here, and I don't have time to go into them, but as we're reading through the Old Testament, Hebron should ring a bell in your mind. If you remember, all the way back in the book of Genesis, God called a man Abraham, to come out to the promised land. And he said, I will give you this land to your descendants. But in reality, the only place that Abram owned was Hebron, where his grave was, right? Where he owned that little section for his wife's grave, and so they go through Hebron, and then what happens? We see that they see the descendants of Anak, which are the giants. We later know these as the Philistines, and so they are. They come into this, and then we see that they come into a huge cluster of grapes where they have to carry it between two of them on a pole. So you would imagine a pretty large cluster of grapes. They also brought back pomegranates and figs, and they called this place the Valley of the Eshcol, or the Valley of the Clusters, or the cluster of grapes. And so just know that they're going in, they go all the way to the north, they come all the way back south, they gain fruits and vegetables, they come together, and they're bringing them back for Israel to see, to show them how much of a blessing that this land is. And then we see at the end of 40 days, they come back and they meet at Kadesh, verse 26, and they brought back to them and to Israel, and they showed them the fruit. You have to imagine, put yourself in the minds of Israel. They were slaves. They didn't have much. They went to the desert, to Sinai. They stayed there for a year. They've been traveling through even a worse desert for 2 months. And now they see what the promised land has to offer. Huge clusters of grapes, delicious pomegranates and figs, and all of these fruits and vegetables that they bring back. For Israel, who's been out in the desert living a slave life, this would have seemed like heaven on earth, right? Oh my goodness, this would have been so amazing. In verse 27, it says, when we came into the land that you sent us, notice that the spies, the 12, are saying that we came into the land that you, Israel, sent us. But who actually sent them? God sent them, right? God told Moses to get 12 men, but they're not acknowledging God. They're acknowledging Israel. So as you're reading, you start to see kind of the decline of this situation. Israel, you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey, right? So it's good for grazing. So cows produce milk, and it's plentiful, lots of flowers and trees. So honey, bees, pollination. So it just means it's a good edible land, and it's fruit. He says it's exactly as God has promised. It's flowing with milk and honey, but notice verse 28. However, maybe your translation says nevertheless. It's so good. But, and then we start to see, but the people who in the land are strong. The cities are fortified. The cities are large. The giants, the Anak, live there. The Machilites dwell in the land. The Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites and the Canaanites. And they say, man, it's everything that God's promised, but it's big and scary, and there's a lot there, right? And so it's great. It's exactly what God said is for us, but we're not strong enough, right? It's a great message, but we can't do this. And notice what happens, verse 30. But Caleb, one of the spies, quieted the people before Moses. He spoke up before Moses, and he said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. We can see the courage of Caleb. Caleb had a faithfulness in God. God has promised to them. He believes God. He trusts God. He is a courageous man. And he says, let's go. Yes, there's large cities. Yes, they're fortified. Yes, there's giants. Yes, there's this. And yes, there's that. But God said it's ours. We have to trust in God. Let's go. Let's go. Then the men who had gone up with him, we are not able to go up against these people, for they are stronger. Who are they stronger than? Are they stronger than God? No, absolutely not. They're stronger than the Israelites, and that's what they were referring to. Remember, you sent us. Israel, the power was in Israel, not in God. So was the people of the promised land stronger than the people of Israel? Absolutely. but the people of the promised land was not stronger than the God of the people of Israel. And so they did not look to God for strength, they looked to themselves for strength. So because they knew that they were lesser, they weren't as strong, what happens? They brought to the people of Israel a bad report. You know what that means? They lied. They said, yeah, it's really good, but we can't tell them that because they're going to want to go and we could die because I don't trust in God. So we've got to give them a bad story. We got to make it sound like God has lied. God has misled us. And this is how they do it. It says, they say they have gone and spotted out a land that devours its inhabitants. That's a lie. There's civilizations, people everywhere. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Michalites, the Canaanites. People are living there in large cities. It's not devouring anybody. That was a lie. All the people that we saw are of great height. That's a lie. Not all the people are. It was only the people on the western coast, in the place that we call today Gaza, where these descendants of the Anakim or the Philistines were living. So it's not all the people. They're lying. They're stretching the truth. Then he says that we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers. They were so big, we were like little bugs under their feet. That's a lie. Nobody's that tall. And so we can see here of how they twisted the report and lied so that they would not have to go, right? And so when we read this story, and we kind of know the story well, but we can see that when we focus on ourselves, we will never come into the blessings of God. It's only when we focus on God and we believe in God and we trust in God, then we will fully fulfill and receive the blessings of God. It's the same thing that Jesus says in the gospel. He says that discipleship is the cost of everything, that we must be willing to deny ourselves. We must be willing to carry our cross daily. We must put both hands to the plow and look forward. Our faithfulness in God is everything. And anyone who is not fully looking at God, then they're not looking at God at all. You can't look at God while looking back over your shoulder. I hope that makes sense. And as we continue this journey, we will pick up tomorrow in chapter 14. God bless.